Hello everyone, a few days ago we were speaking about the potential leak. We don't know if this is actually true or not, or just a very good guess. And I did say that there is still a lot of potential DLC for Total War Warhammer 3. And as you guys know that I speak about this game so much, I've got notes about potential DLCs that could make this game last a fair amount of years, even if there's a Warhammer 40k or a Med 3 on the way or whatever, really. I mean, there was rumors about a Star Wars at some point too. So in this video, we're going to come up with some mock DLC ideas, and this is in no way indicative of what Creative Assembly may or may not be working, but just some basic ideas with, you know, a bit of a passion project, if anything. But before anything, a big thank you to our sponsor, Instant Gaming. Instant Gaming is a platform where you can buy games at discounted rates, new games, those on pre-order, even those who have been out for quite some time now. You can get some pretty good rates. Gaming has become very expensive, and if you're like me and you're playing a lot of Warhammer the Old World, yeah, those armies aren't cheap. It's £65 for a Beast Pack unit. But I still want to be able to buy games, so Instant Gaming is the platform that I myself have been using for a fair amount of time now. Not only that, but we do have a monthly giveaway going on. Win the game of your choice. All you have to do is click on the link in the description below and just sign up. You don't even have to make a purchase. This is a company that I've been working with for about a year now, and it's been quite consistent, and it's great to be able to work with a company for a long term. Making a purchase through my special link in the description below also supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which is great. That means that you get a nice deal and you can also support the channel. Once again, a big thank you to Instant Gaming, and now let's return to our regularly scheduled programming. Now, for the sake of this video, I'm going to talk about mostly the 1v1v1 format that we've been kind of used to at this point. This is stuff like Omens of Destruction, Shadows of Change, Thrones of Decay, as it seems to be the way forward that Creative Assembly are really getting into. The next DLC is going to be Norska Sonesh, and we don't know the other faction. Though an educated guess could say High Elves at this point, there have been loads of murmurings going out, so I'm going to purposely ignore Norska, Sonesh, and High Elves, just in case, and we'll look towards other factions that do actually need a fair amount of help. So yeah, let's get started, right? So the first DLC I'm going to call Conclave of Stars. This is going to be Lizardmen versus Cathay versus Beastmen. I know I said no Beastmen in the previous video, but I feel like this kind of fits because the idea here is most of the work is going to go into the Lizardmen, a bit less work on Cathay, and then very little work going on the Beastmen because the Beastmen are generally quite fine. Lizardmen and Cathay do have some history, as we know Union the Sea Dragon does attack Cathay, and this could be reliving that, and the Beastmen doing their own side thing because at the end of the day, there's always a faction that just kind of feels a little bit out of place there. Lizardmen have had a lot of attention in Warhammer 2, but they are in desperate need of a rework for Warhammer 3. I don't think a standalone patch is going to fix that problem for them. They're in need of the production cycle of a DLC, and I feel like this is decent amount of content just to kind of finish that up. So, Legendary Lord, we got Teto. He's the last missing major character for the Lizardmen. He is a skink priest that also rides on a palanquin, very similar to that of a Slann mage priest, and he's respected and given the reverence like a peer to the Slann, which is really cool. He is a character that is able to understand the stars, he's able to see into the future, he shows up when the Lizardmen kind of need it, or he informs other Lizardmen, hey, there's going to be a massive problem happening in 2 weeks here, go down there and go and be the savior. Chakax the Eternity Warden would be a great melee hero option for legendary heroes. This is a character which a lot of people have been wanting for because he's a temple guard, he's known to be very strong, he's got a great weapon too. I think that he would be a great fit here just to be able to fit into that theming. Plus, the Lizardmen need another legendary hero. It would be nice. Obviously, you do have Lord Croak, but having extra options is always great. And I would say that you'd end up with a third legendary hero here, mostly because we do have loads of options when it comes to Lord and Hero choices, and when it came to Omens of Destruction for Khorne's side, since there was no generic hero, they decided to make another legendary hero. Just jumping with a quick edit here, I meant that there wouldn't be a generic Lord option here, because everything is kind of covered. I know some people would be saying, what about a Chameleon Skink Lord and Hero option? But I would say that it's not really needed, because you can give your skinks stalk and stuff. And the ones that can't should just have the stalk option, so you're kind of golden there. So Chakax would be your melee hero, Lord Croak would be your spellcaster, and Incy Wincy would be your skirmishing skink. So he'd be able to buff up skinks quite dramatically to make just a full doom stack of them, kind of like what you've seen there with the Hobgoblin character for the Chaos Dwarves, kind of like we've seen for a lot of heroes now. A lot of heroes have been introduced, named ones, which are more focused on making a doom stack of otherwise crappy units. For a generic unit, I'd say bring in a Sacred Kroxigor type of hero. That way we've got the Lord and the hero variants, and that means that your Nakai campaigns would be a little bit more themed, just going as many Kroxigors as possible, rather than bringing a support hero or Saurus or whatever, right? The idea here is theming. Plus, you'd be able to use them with everyone. And I kind of like the idea of Teto Echo just showing up and having 2 Kroxigor heroes protecting him at all times. Then we got to go for some units, and obviously when it comes to this format, it's usually around 5 to 4 units. It does very much depend. So there's not a lot of units that could come in here, but they could do some throwbacks to some pretty old school things. So bear with me here, as the units are going to be kind of repeated here. You've got Colchians, so these are terror birds, they're quite fast, they're skirmish units, small entity size, but they're there to kind of go in and out, right? You've got cold ones and horn ones, but no Colchians for the skinks. Alongside that, you'd have them with mounted variants, so you'll have Colchian skink riders with spears and bows. They could be 1 unit, which is why I've got a bonus down there, or they could be separate units, kind of like what they did with the Alarian Reavers a little bit. Then skinks with bows. This is a throwback to a very old box, the 5th edition box with Bretonnia versus Lizardmen. I think that could work out quite well. You got another skirmishing unit there. The idea here is to have a lot of skinks just to finish everything up. And then finally, for a big centerpiece, you would have the Thunder Lizard. So the Thunder Lizard itself would work as a absolutely massive creature. There's been never a model for them. If you Google Warhammer Thunder Lizard Fantasy, it ends up being a fan-made thing. But I do imagine that something could be made up just to have another big creature up there. There's also that one from the Lustria showcase where they did the Arcanodon. Maybe they do that instead. Something big needs to show up for the Lizardmen just to kind of like be like, oh yeah, this is big. But what I've given you is very limited, and that's because that's what the Lizardmen have as a limitation. Moving on to Grand Cathay now, we have a few different options here. Yin the Sea Dragon leading her invasion to Lustria. Yes, the Lustria Bull would have to come back, unfortunately. But I'm keeping on potential theme here, as you know, sailors do look towards the stars to kind of see where they're going, so it makes sense for her, who is known to lead the Cathayan Navy, to be the leader here. Alongside that, I expect some sort of engineered Lord and Hero, because Grand Cathay could actually benefit from an engineer-style Lord and Hero. There was like talk about this before, and we've heard talk about like war artificers in like previous interviews. That kind of sounds like some sort of engineer. And if you're going to be heading out with an invasion force, you're going to want engineers or engineer-type characters to be able to help out with the ships and so on, because they would be mechanics, they would do the general upkeep for that type of stuff, and I just mean it makes sense here, right? It's very difficult to talk about a potential legendary hero here because we have no information on any possible living characters around this period. We know of some very, very faintly, but even then we don't have access to a Cathay army book, so we don't know what to expect. Here I could say a proper melee fighter legendary hero. We do know of another Sentinel, by the way, which exists in Grand Cathay, but I doubt that the Sentinel, which is there to protect Cathay, is going to go out on an invasion force. So I'm saying a melee hero here, kind of Lubu styled. I think a lot of people kind of want that. It'll give you a reason to buff up the melee troopers, because as you start getting later and later into your campaign, you're mostly just focusing on your range and big monsters for the doom stacking. Melee troopers are good, but this will give you another reason to actually use the harmony mechanic that just kind of gets ignored later into the game. Then for units, so again, we know nothing of what's happening with Grand Cathay at the moment. The tabletop minis are coming at some point this year, but even then, I don't think we're going to be getting all of them showcased. I still feel like we're going to get multiple books for Grand Cathay to be able to get like a full-sized roster. So seeing as this is Yin the Sea Dragon, I'm expecting more nautical themed units because it just kind of makes sense there. We need a few kind of ranged skirmishers, and I feel it could be done in a really interesting sense. One, a free company style unit, so they're, pistols and sword weapons. They're going to be good for moving around quite quickly. Also, maybe having aquatic because they're going to be used to be fighting in the water. Think of them more like Corsairs than Free Company, and they'd have a second version with additional hand weapons. So they're going to be a bit stronger than Free Company, maybe a bit weaker than Black Ark Corsairs, flanked alongside some Cathayan Man-Eaters. So since the tabletop has just introduced Cathayan Ogres, those are currently looking like loaders for the artillery pieces, I imagine that we will see a few Cathayan Ogres. It's a bit weird that we haven't seen any yet, because we do know, for example, that Zhao Ming is kind of close to the ogres, but I imagine that we will see some sort of, Cathayan jade-horned ogres or whatever. If they're going to be more nautical theme, a man-eater style with pistols makes a lot of sense, because that gives you a hard hitter that can charge quite well, but also have a little bit of range to get in there. For the big star unit, it would be a flying gunship in the very similar styling of a thunder barge. So we do already have balloons, we have 2 of them already, but I imagine like a really heavy gunship would be the one that you're going to be taking out with you to be your flagship. There might be multiple ones, but I could see flying gunships being a thing with the Cathayans. It just kind of makes sense there. I don't know why, but I imagine it in my head. They'd be limited rather than, like, say, for example, the Marienburg or even the Thunder Barge. The Cathayans would have it more in a similar style to that or the Dreadsaurian, and I think it could work quite well there. Something quite impressive, very, very large, extra artillery, better to hold out, but it would still be slow, so it'd be easy to kill off. Yes, I know a lot of people don't want to see a lot of Thunder Barges, and that's why I'm saying let's put that limited there. And then finally, the Vermilion Bird. I know a lot of people are going, wait, really? We've just got the lunar version, but the Vermilion Bird is what they use to fill up the, like, balloons and stuff. It would be nice to have a fast, smaller version that just goes around and is able to snipe out characters quite quickly. It should be very, very quick. Use the bird as a sort of scout monster too, and there you go. There's a full 5 units, legendary hero, very legendary lord, and the generic lord and hero option. Let's go on to the Beastmen now, and this is going to be kind of left field because I know a lot of people are going to be really Beastmen. Why is that coming in? But the Beastmen still require another legendary lord option, I'd say, some lord and hero options. Just kind of finish them off there. And what I can see from the Beastmen is very simple. Gorus Warhoof as a legendary lord. This is a character that's even returning for Warhammer the Old World, so that's going to be quite exciting. Get a Centaur Lord and Hero, and that way all different types of Beastmen that lead their own warbands are kind of represented that way. And if you're wondering why Gorus Warhoof would fit into this DLC, it's that simple. He got drunk, he looked at the stars, and he thought, okay, we have to go that way. This is something that actually happens with the Beastmen, so it fits with the theming. When it comes to a legendary hero, I can see Slugtongue being introduced. This is a legendary hero which focuses very heavily around corruption and plagues and so on. So this would be a Beastman spellcaster with the Lore of Nurgle, making him incredibly unique, as we don't have any Beastmen characters with a lot of, like, God-touched influences. Yes, we do have, like, the God-touched gores, but having the magic I think would be kind of cool. Ungrel Fourhorn is another legendary hero which is just going to be there to boost up your crap stack. Now you might be saying, okay, this is too many legendary heroes, but keep in mind here, the Beastmen don't have a lot going for them. They don't really have a lot of units, and the idea here is, well, there's going to be less units, there's likely going to be more of a character pack for the Beastmen than anything else, so they might as well pad it out as much as they can. They'll boost up your Ungors and make them relevant for late game in one single army, and I think that kind of works. It's just something different. It's not amazing, because, like, you know, Ungors are, well, pretty garbage, but hey, better that than nothing, right? We've seen it happen with other characters before. Units, there won't be a lot. Armored Centaurs, maybe 2 different versions, one with additional hand weapons, one with great weapons, just to give you that type of chosen feel for the Centaurs. The Praeton would be the big centerpiece here, you know, it's a flying monster, it can induce madness on its enemies, it's something that I imagine would be very, very stylized here. I know some people are expecting it for the Sinesh DLC, but I'm just not. It doesn't really fit with Sinesh. I don't know why, but it just doesn't fit. That's just pretty much it for Beastmen, so the idea here is you're getting more work out of character options more than anything else in this DLC. The Beastmen don't have anything. The Centaurs, the armored Centaurs aren't really a thing, but I imagine it could fit very well with Gorus as a leading lord, and it's not the first time nor the last time that we've seen Creative Assembly take some creative liberties there. Like, for example, all the different types of units that never really existed in the book, which have found themselves in game. You know, we never really had that orange version of the Chameleon Skinks, or the exalted versions of the Demonettes and Bloodletters. So this could be possible with permission from Games Workshop, and I imagine that Gorus could end up leading some elite version here. Now, you'd be thinking, where is an FLC Legendary Lord going to come from? The Lizardmen have nothing at this point, the Cathayans have nothing at this point, the Beastmen do have one, and that would be Moonclaw as an FLC Legendary Lord. The most of the work was going to the Beastmen in terms of characters. The units coming in would be for Cathay and for Lizardmen. This is a bit cheaper to produce, but it makes sense for Cathay to have, Lizardmen to have, and for the Beastmen to have. The main rework would go to the Lizardmen, because obviously, oh my god, the Lizardmen really need a proper proper touch up, you know, fix up their technology tree really badly, some of the construction and just general skills and stuff. A quality of life update for Cathay, just a few passes here and there. Cathay's in a very, very good spot. I wouldn't say no to like a unique mechanic for Zhao Ming, to be honest, because technically the one that he shares with Miao Yin should be Miao Yin exclusive. And then finally a quick pass on the Beastmen just to give something to, you know, the characters that kind of need a little bit more. Morga getting access to all the God-touched versions of the Chaos Spawn to make him the Chaos Spawn faction. A little bit there for Malagor just to give him some sort of minor mechanic. And then finally with Khazrak, something there just like really stylized. Give him something to have, like, hunt down humans, right? He's the enemy of man. I know some people would be saying Gorfor the Beast Lord is a possible legendary character for the Beastmen, but I think that Gorus just fits a lot better, as Gorfor and Khazrak are very, very similar. The only difference is one rides on a rather large chariot, and that's it. And even then, Khazrak gets access to a chariot, so yeah, just too similar. Alright, another idea. This one I've been thinking about quite some time now. Visions of Doom. This is going to feature the Tomb Kings. Yes, I know it sounds weird, but hear me out here. Kislev, yes, they had a DLC with Shadows of Change, but I could see another one coming in with just a little bit to kind of round them off fully. And then finally, the Wood Elves. You might be thinking this is a really odd matchup, but it would be kind of more similar to that of Omens of Destruction, where Omens of Destruction didn't really have an overlying theme. They were all doing their own thing. So I want to start off with the Tomb Kings, because I feel like a DLC like this would be before a hypothetical End Times DLC, before Nagash, before the Monkey King, before anything like that massive type of project that we're expecting. So we'll start off the Tomb Kings, and we're going to go with Ramotep the Visionary as a legendary lord. I know that sounds incredibly left field, but hear me out here, right? Ramotep is one of those characters in lore that created massive, marvelous statues. Those which echoed the gods themselves. People thought that the gods were actually living among them because of them. He's incredibly well respected, and it could be that the gods would reach out to Ramotep because they sense the return of Nagash and they sense the impending doom of the end times. Ramotep would then be charged to awaken the other constructs. He'd be very unique because he'd be the only Necrotech Lord also, providing huge faction effects towards anything that's considered a construct, like the Subaltern Stalkers, the Bone Giant, all that type of stuff. He'd be supported by a Bone Giant character in the form of Sahenazmet. I know a lot of people would say Prince Apophis, but I would imagine Prince Apophis showing up during the end times alongside Nagash, as Nagash kind of eats most of the Nehakaran pantheon actually, and he takes over as the god there. Well, some say yes, some say no. It's a bit of a weird thing when it comes to the end times. So that would give us a spellcasting Bone Giant that is fairly quite unique. It would allow the Creative Assembly art team to pretty much go as ham as possible, and I think that's kind of cool. This character would also only be available for the Tomb Kings, not for Nagash in the future, whereas Prince Apophis would be available for all of them. And now we can go into the generic stuff. The main thing right now is the fact that the Tomb Kings still do not have their hero fonts, High Lich Priests. This is something that is actually needed in the tabletop, and for some reason we still don't have Spellcaster generic lords. So yeah, generic High Lich Priests with access to the lore of Death, Light, Nakara, and Shadows. It's really, really weird still that we don't have them. I'm actually surprised that Games Workshop, with how weird they are with their AP, didn't say, hey, this needs to go now into the game, considering that you need to have them in your armies. Now, you wouldn't have to need to have them, but I think a lot of people want Spellcaster Lords, right? It's really important. And then for a generic hero, well, a Herald. This would be your buffer generic hero, so rather than the Prince focusing on melee, and obviously your Necrotech focusing on your constructs, and your Priests focusing on spellcasting, this one will be buffing up your armies, buffing up your Tomb Guard, buffing up your chariots, just to a stronger degree than most of the other heroes or lords would be able to do with their respective lines. Units would focus around constructs, and some constructs we already have in the game, so I'm adding an extra unit here just to kind of justify that it's kind of like a reskin DLC in a sense. First up, Scarab Swarms as a swarm unit. Yes, they're already kind of represented in a sense, but like a proper unit, a little bit larger. They would be like the size of individualized Nurglings, or maybe even a little bit smaller, but you still be able to see them. The idea here is to finally have the swarms there as very strong tar pit units. They wouldn't do a lot of damage, but they would be able to take loads and loads of punishment, give them high physical resistance, and that's going to be kind of cool. I feel like a lot of people, myself included, miss the swarms, especially since swarms are now kind of like monstrous entities in the old world. Maybe they could do that version instead. Fast moving, tar pits with poison attacks. I feel it could work quite well. If they go with the old world version, because it's still something that's just been re-established, it's something that used to exist but it's just been reimagined, I feel that that could be justification to using the new version. Keep in mind that the demons, right? A lot of the demons just use the Age of Sigmar versions now too, so it's just weird with Games Workshop, which is, yeah, one thing is okay, but the other thing, which is exactly the same thing and in the same setting, doesn't work. The Bone Thrower could come in. Yes, I know it's not the most exciting thing, and CA are really loving their bolt throwers, considering that the next patch is going to have the Hobgoblin version too, but I feel like, yeah, it's iconic, it's old school. Old fans would really appreciate it, plus it's something that's just anti-large, and yeah, I mean, it's not the worst thing. Sometimes there's always a unit which is kind of considered a bit of a dud. Then the Khemric Titan as the big Forge World style centerpiece thing, it just fits. Unless they want to go with the Bone Dragon, but I very much doubt it. Because like they treat old world new units as a separate IP. So the Khemric Titan is a giant scarab, and that's something that does a lot of damage. It's very durable, be very similar to that of the Dread Saurian. And the Tomb King still need that unit that has that wow factor. So I think this fits incredibly well. Then it would be some, unfortunately, reskinned units, but I feel like this could kind of fit. Upshati with great weapons, which is weird that we still don't have these, considering that you can get them on the tabletop, and they're kind of cool. And Bone Giants with a great weapon and additional hand weapon. That's it. That gives us a few more constructs. There's not really a lot missing for the Tomb Kings. This is a Tomb King DLC that I feel like some people can get behind, because you get a cool Legendary Lord, you get some new units, some really big units, and the idea here is just to kind of finish off the Tomb Kings for the eventuality of Nagash. Alright, here we go with the Wood Elves. So the Wood Elves would be very different here because it's a smaller faction, and I think a lot of people are thinking, why Wood Elves? But it makes sense because right before the fall, this is a end times tie-in, right? We would then see Lilith, you know, one of the goddesses in the Elven Pantheon, going to the Wood Elves and going, hey, shit's about to go down, you need to start preparing, and it's going to tie into the FLC a little bit later on. So for this, I'd go with a legendary lord known as Araloth. This is a character that's returning right now for the old world, and I think Araloth fits quite well. He is the Herald of Ariel. Now, Ariel's a legendary hero, which kind of seems a bit weird, but I understand what Creative Assembly were doing there. I think that Araloth could work quite well. He's being sent by Ariel to go to another location, to go and prepare, to go deal with some enemies. Maybe he could start off in Cathay, for example. The great thing about the Wood Elves is they don't really need to stay in the same location. They can teleport anywhere else, but it makes sense for a character to be sent off and investigate what might be going on. Araloth is actually more investigating the Monkey King and his doings, because he's trying to keep an eye on that. Story-wise, it could fit in the ways like, oh, something's happening in Cathay, and we're feeling the emergence of the death magic getting stronger. Even though that's where Nagash is, it's kind of linked up in a certain sense. You'd have a proper elf character on foot. He'd have a lot of bonuses towards Glade Archers, Glade Riders, all the usual stuff there. And he'd be supported by Score the Falconeer, which would be more on the vein of a Beastmaster type hero. We'll be talking about that a little bit later, but giving you a reason to have more beasts in your armies. It's something that the Wood Elves do quite well here, and this is going to be one of those weird packs where it's going to focus mostly on characters rather than units themselves, because the Wood Elves are generally quite done, but this is just to finish them off. Lord and Heroes, we'd have the Shadow Dancer as a Lord with the Lore of Shadows, because it just makes a lot of sense there. That's the Spellcaster variant, and it would do a lot of damage on melee. It's supposed to be there just to boost up your War Dancers and a few other different units to focus more on skirmish-based warfare. Yes, we already have a Spellcaster with the Lore of Shadows, but I feel like a melee version is going to be kind of cool, and he would be supported by a Blade Singer hero. This is the unit champion for the War Dancers, but elevated to hero status, as we've seen many times since Warhammer 2 and Warhammer 3. Here's where things get a little bit more funky, because another generic hero would jump in. This would be the Beastmaster, which would incentivize you to use some more beasts coming in. This is something that's just recently returned for Warhammer the Old World, a 1987 mini, which is absolutely wild, but kind of cool. And things get a little bit stranger here, because I could imagine them going, okay, Lore of Athaloran is part of the paid content. Normally, a new spell lore is in a FLC, but there's not a lot that they can do with the Wood Elves, and they could justify with this here if it's something that people would be very interested in, because I do imagine that the lore of Athaloran would be very, very different, and it gives a completely new and unique spell lore to the Wood Elves, who otherwise got kind of screwed over with just getting the lore of light magic and dark magic as the 8th edition interpretation. But Creative Assembly like going back to earlier editions. This is why we see a lot of stuff from the Storm of Chaos and 6th edition in general. Unit-wise, there's not a lot, I'm not going to lie. This is why I think the lore of Athaloran would be put up here, because one, it would be the Meadow Chariot or the Forest Chariot, depending on what you want to call it. It was called multiple things. That's something which I think a lot of Wood Elf players would enjoy, getting some chariots back in. You could also have them as mount options too, which would be great for certain characters. Forest Cats will also come in because, you know, Beastmasters would use them and they're actually with a Beastmaster kit. So it would be kind of different stylized version of like the cat that Kislev has, but a completely new look. It wouldn't look like an ice cat or have all these like gemstones and so on. There's no need for bears and wolves because we already have them there. Maybe the boars because I don't know. I don't see them being very exciting, but I guess since a lot of work was going into the hero characters and also the lore, they're probably thinking of how could we make it a little bit easier to make when it comes to the units. And then finally the Fen Beast. So the Fen Beast here is mostly associated with Albion, but it's not likely that we'll ever see an Albion race. I think actually one of the points of interest in game basically says that everyone in there is dead because Belagor took over. So yeah, I feel like this could work here. The Fen Beasts are pretty cool overall, and it would be a shame not to get them. Now in a hypothetical Dogs of War DLC, I could see them there too, but this is knocking it out earlier so they can focus on other units there, which would then be transferable. Keep in mind that there are units in other DLCs which are available to other DLC characters, like a lot of the squigs for Gorbad. Alright, now we're moving on to Kislev. Now, I wasn't going to include Kislev originally because we know next to nothing about Kislev. I think we know more about Grand Cathay than we do about Kislev. But I want to include them here because I hope that Kislev doesn't get ignored too much, and I've got a pretty decent-ish idea, I think. We're just going to have to talk about this and let it take shape, right? So for a Legendary Lord, I'm thinking about a skirmish-style Legendary Lord. Finally bringing in the Ungls that are missing. They are kind of referenced in-game, and also, come on, like the Horse Archers and the Kislevite Warriors, they're pretty much Ungls. But I feel like it's about time that they got mentioned properly, especially since Games Workshop have their reference when it comes to the Old World map. So, let's start off with a Ungl-style skirmish legendary lord. He's there to be a scout more than anything else, right? So he'd be in another part of the world. He's not going to be in Kislev proper because it's already cramped enough as it is with only just 2 legendary lords there. But this new character in question would be summoned up because all 3 main aspects of Kislev, so the Patriarchy, the Ice Court, and even Mother Ostankia, deem that there needs to be a warrior renowned for tracking and hunting that needs to go out and investigate what may be going on. Supported by a hunter-type hero as a legendary hero. These would have to be new characters. We got no names and stuff. This is the problem when, you know, everything has been kind of rewritten, which is kind of annoying. But it's important to start bringing in the skirmish aspect of Kislev because you can skirmish a lot. You have a lot of cavalry for that, and you never really get to do that. Don't get me wrong, the Golden Knight is cool and so on, but she's better on foot than she is mounted. For a Lord option, a Patriarch Superior, this is just a Lord version of the Patriarch, and I think the idea here would be finally update them a little bit with some skills, make them a little bit more useful, because they kind of suck right now, let's be honest, even as a hero form. So it would be about time just to see them updated properly, having more options for blessings, maybe 3 different or 4 different unique skill lines for each god, and you can pick one, it'll lock the others, right? So it really centers on the religion aspect of Kislev, which unfortunately is mostly through secondary mechanics. A hero option would be a Soul, I'm probably mispronouncing it, but the idea here would be a steward type hero to buff up your troopers. Not your big monsters and stuff, but your troopers. I feel like that could be quite good because Kislev really should have support heroes. You have it in the form of, say, for example, the Patriarch, which does help out, and you do get some support stuff from the Frost Maidens, but yeah, just like a proper hero, which is support, it focuses also on doing some damage in melee. I feel like Kislev really does need a melee hero, not a warrior priest or a caster, but also a melee hero. It's something small, but it helps. Now for units, this is where things do get a little bit weird. We don't have a lot going on. It's how it's going to be for Kislev. There could be a new version of the Uragan cannon, by the way. It could be updated to be, oh yeah, you know, this is pulled by bears instead, and stylized rather than being a cannon, but more so an organ gun, which I think is how most people represented it when they were doing like their conversion pieces for way back in the day during 6th edition. I feel like that could be a really nice new unit, having a highly mobile organ gun for Kislev. Well, it's still not highly mobile because bears, they're not that quick, but you know what I mean. Ungol Horse Masters could come in, making them a very high tier skirmish cavalry unit. So right now we do have some skirmish cav, you know, in the form of the horse archers, but think of them much stronger, better at melee. In general, they're just supposed to be kind of like how the Norskins have their horse masters for the marauders. Similar to that. Put them quite strong. They won't be as hard-hitting as, say, for example, the Winged Lancers or the Griffin Legion, but you will have high hitting power and very fast horses to be able to shoot around with. Some Ungol Warriors, which would be like additional hand weapon skirmish troopers, they would be similar to the Akshina Ambushers, but no range weapons whatsoever. I think that Kislev relies way too heavily on hybrid units, which yes, I did put a hybrid unit in here, but hey. And the idea here is just to have something which is kind of like a berserker type unit. You know, they're very primal, they're very in tune with nature, and they're very good at killing off infantry whilst not being like super defensive. There's definitely a trade-off there. And then lastly, a Frost Fiend. The idea why I'm saying 4 here is mostly because I could imagine 2 different types of Ungol units, but one doesn't come into my head. I've just literally in my notebook, because I write these notes down, right? Physically, I've just got Ungols times 2, question mark, question mark. With the Frost Fiend we've talked about before, modders have also done their interpretation as a giant frost bat. I personally would like to see kind of like a giant frost owl. I don't know why, but I find owls a little bit prettier, and I feel like it fits with the theme of Kislev more. With those units added in, you actually end up with a fair amount of representation from all the parts of Kislev, because you'd have, you know, the Uragan cannon, which is kind of like Kislev Central, the Horse Masters, and that from the Ungols, Supreme Patriarchs for the Patriarchy, and then the Frost Fiends, kind of like Mother Ostankia's influence. You've got all 3 of the lords, or all 3 of the major aspects coming in. And that takes us to the FLC, Warhammer, Beastslayer, and a Bretonnia rework. I don't think you guys were expecting this, but this is why I said Wood Elves. Lilith is getting active, and unfortunately, given the end times, which is unfortunately canon, Lilith is the Lady of the Lake. So, if she's sending out the Wood Elves to kind of get up and running, she'd likely start to prepare her meat shields, that of the Bretonnians, too. Which would mean, Warhammer Beastslayer, we know that this character was actually designed a while back because his art, well, a bit of the concept art at least, is found in the art book. A Bretonnia rework for times the charm. You know, maybe an actual Crusade mechanic. There's just no luck about maybe getting a DLC for Bretonnia, so I feel like FLC just works out quite well. We want Foot Knights, but it's a different IP, unfortunately, so yeah, we have to make do with what we can get. Quality of life update to the Tomb Kings, maybe adding Confederation mechanics and so on, maybe just a little bit of a tweak here and there. Same thing, a little bit of a tweak to the Wood Elves, and that's pretty much it. Gives have a fine 6.1 kind of sorted everything out, but that's an idea. You see? Visions of Doom. Now I'm just going to give 2 major ideas, mostly because, well, this video is already like about a half an hour long, if not more. But there's clearly more. There's like the Vampire Counts Champions of Chaos style DLC. A lot of people have been wanting that. The Dogs of War, which are suddenly rumored that might not be in production. A lot of people would like mercenaries that every faction would be able to recruit and have a mercenary faction to play around with, especially with how interesting Golg Maneater was. Maybe the separation of Talia and Estalia into their own respective faction. Character packs so we can finally see just like summon the Electocounts and it'll just be a lot of Electocounts. Other 1v1v1 Lord packs, there's a few ideas that could be done there. There's still a decent amount of content there left. Hobgoblin Carnets, even though we are getting the Hobgoblin Bolt Thrower for some reason. Halflings in sub-race form. Just other new races in Koresh and so on. Unless there's going to be a Total War Warhammer 4 or Total War Warhammer The Old World, there's no reason that this can't be potentially explored even if a Total War 40k is coming. There is no reason why 2 Warhammer games cannot run at the exact same time. Obviously, this is pending Creative Assembly's want and need to be able to do this, and also with Games Workshop, but CA Sophia are doing a lot of stuff for Warhammer now. I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that they might be looking for. This game could be expanded upon. There could be a pure dedicated overhaul for the game fix up the engine issues, and then start making more DLCs. I love this title. There's a lot that could be done. Maybe CA Sophia, if the leaks are true, where it's like, oh, there might not be this, there might not be that. Maybe they're just not too well versed with the Warhammer universe. It could happen. You know, they've been working on a lot of historical stuff. It's very expected that the core people at CA Sophia are history buffs more than anything else. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's start a bit of a discussion. The two ideas that I came up with, they were in my notes. They're some of the first pages that I had there. So let me know what you guys think about that. I do have some others, but I just wanted to talk about it. There is so much potential. And I'm not saying that Creative Assembly should take my ideas. At the end of the day, they've got their own vision for the game. I will never claim that I know better than them when it comes to DLCs or running their business in general. I would argue about certain things like any other content creator or any just general consumer would, but I do love this title. I would like to see it last as long as possible because, yeah, you know, this is the most ambitious Warhammer Fantasy game that we've ever had and will still be considered the most ambitious Total War game or even Warhammer game. Even if 40k Total War does happen, this revived the setting. That's something that you never hear about. 40k is perfectly fine. If a Total War 40k never happens, big whoop, you know, like it's never going to hurt 40k. But this one revived fantasy. And that's why I'm so emotionally attached to it. Anyways, guys, you have a great day. I'm running around. It's getting close to end of year for me, so I am starting to do all my paperwork and so on. Well, not really starting. It's just kind of making everything coherent. So, yeah, I'll see you all again very, very soon, guys. No stream today, but there will be a stream tomorrow. Bye. And I just want to point out something. I know some other creators are like, oh yeah, you know, I'm done with Warhammer Fantasy or whatever. You might be. I'm not. Other people aren't. That's important, right? You got to think about other people, not just because you want the next big title and you want the views from a potential Total War 40k, which yes, would be big views and big money. But yeah, we want these games to last. It's about time that they lasted a little bit longer and they got the support that they deserved.